We went to 27 restaurants in 3.5 days.
Told you, insane.
We wanted to understand some key things about how beef is cooked in Argentina and make sure that we weren't missing some things or there was things for us to learn.
All right, welcome back to Industry Only at the Cheese Store. That's Dom over there. I'm Andy. Today we have the Zuka sandwich, and we have our guest, Jerry Greenberg. You know Jerry's restaurants, SUGARFISH, Nozawa Bar, KazuNori, Wovo, Hi-Ho, Matu. He was part of the team that brought Willie Mays to Los Angeles. But I really want to start talking about how Jerry and I know each other and how it's been this, great, beautiful, kind of mutually destructive experience, relationship, just in terms of the way that we eat together. So to make a long story short, we know each other not from food circles, but essentially from West Side poker circles, through games that we've been playing in for a long time. A lot of the people in those games are very interested in food. Some of them invest in restaurants. Some of them are directly involved in restaurants. But what I didn't realize about Jerry is that he is straight up an insane food person. And when you go out to eat with Jerry, sometimes it's 3 dinners or it's 1 restaurant, but you're at that restaurant for 5.5 hours. And now at Matū, his steak restaurant nearby in Beverly Hills that serves 100% grass-fed beef from First Light in New Zealand, which Jerry's part owner of. I'm going to get that all in first. He has a new menu called Lock, Stock, and Barrel, where it is the experience of what it's like to eat with Jerry, where it's basically just fire everything good on the menu and we'll figure it out later. And I think 3 words sum up the craziness better than anything else. And those words are cheesesteak for dessert. So run me through what this menu is and how you got to cheesesteak for dessert.
Well, first of all, it's good to be here.
Thank you for coming.
Andy just called me insane, and I take it as a compliment. So thank you. Thank you. That doesn't happen.
Well, no, we're the same kind of insane.
But you're right. And you're also, I think we met actually at a charity poker event. So we do charitable things. We're not just, playing for money. But to your point, Andy, I do think that the Lock, Stock, and Barrel to some way could look at kind of summing up our relationship, right? And it goes back to a dinner we had before Matū opened, which was 3 years ago, which I can't believe. Over 3 years ago. But we did a tasting dinner before we opened that Andy was there. And we were running through what is now known as the Matū dinner, but we also had been playing with the idea of a cheesesteak for a while because I'm from South Jersey, so you have to have a cheesesteak. And at the end of that meal, we served a cheesesteak only because it was the end of the meal, not because we thought it was a good idea. But the people that were part of the tasting, and this particularly was Phil Rosenthal, because somebody's got to feed Phil.
Who?
Somebody has to feed Phil. He said, "Wow, cheesesteak for dessert," and that stayed in our brains for a long time. Obviously, so just a couple of weeks ago, we put together, as Andy said, a menu called Lock, Stock, and Barrel, which really is the way that we eat. I mean, and that means it's a lot of food. So if you do want to order it, be ready. It's a lot of food.
It's for 4 people.
I was going to say, is it for a certain amount
of people? It's for 4 people,
Uh-huh.
and it starts with the broth that we always do, and then there's a raw course, a braised course, there's a picanha skewers course. You got to have some French fries, ribeye, but then the close is the cheesesteak for dessert.
God, I love cheesesteak.
But it is how I eat. So if you go, and Dom, my wife, Adi. So if you, Dom, if we went out to dinner at Matū and we're sitting there having, whatever it is we're having, maybe we're going to have one of the 4-course meals, whatever, but about, halfway through, Adi would look at you, Dom, and say, do we realize we're going to go to the bar and have a cheesesteak for dessert?
Yeah, to be clear, the cheesesteak was bar only until this special menu happened. Right. And Jerry follows the rules in his own restaurants more than anybody else attempts to follow them. So yeah, you have to go to the bar to eat the cheesesteak.
But it is literally how we eat, and because the thing is, the cheesesteak, obviously it has cheese. It has a sharp cheese on it. It has a long hot, an Italian long hot. So
what kind of cheese? We're at the cheese store. What kind of cheese on the cheesesteak?
It's Cooper Sharp.
Okay.
So it's not as fancy as the great cheeses that are here.
No, I'm just kidding. I had that cheesesteak and it's amazing.
But it's a mouthful in terms of flavor. And if you eat it after having the steaks and the various things you have, I think it's a great compliment. Some people come and eat it before, and I tell people don't do that.
It's so satisfying to do it in this specific order. Yeah. You're right.
So it really is. It came from something many years ago. Something somebody said. It never left our brains, but we're super excited to have it.
Where did this influence come from that inspired this amazing steak restaurant? Because obviously everything you do is very meticulous. It's very well thought out. It's thought out not only from execution of a kitchen, but also from a guest experience. Like, where did that influence to just like go deep on steak?
Let me sort of ask this a different way, because I think we're both asking the same question, but I want to be very pointed about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm nervous too. I thought my question was pretty good. I got to be honest.
Great question.
Thank you.
What were the things that you actually learned from eating in American steakhouses, eating in Argentina, eating in Asia, and what made you decide that, okay, this is the beef that we're using and this is the way that we're going to cook it?
Do I get to choose which question to answer?
Same question.
We all know
Oh,
mine.
it's the same question.
Well, isn't it the same question?
Let me try to answer both questions.
So that means it's not the same. It's a nice way of telling you it's not the same question.
All right. Well, we know which question's the better question, but we're good.
I got into the restaurant industry back in 2007, 2008, and obviously have learned a ton. Everybody has an opinion about how restaurants should be run because everybody eats in restaurants and everybody's an expert. Let me tell you, there's a tremendous amount to learn. But as I got into the business, I did, actually it was more because of my kids. I do like steak. I like to eat beef. And I wanted my kids to have something that could be healthful, sustainable, and a good choice for them. And so I kind of started looking at what are better forms of beef, and I ultimately stumbled into First Light. So that's how that happened. But it's like one thing is always connected to another. So opened up Hi-Ho, the burger business, the only place that has grass-fed Wagyu. You know that story. But that was getting to know First Light better, and then one thing led to another, and then the First Light folks asked if I would be the first outside owner or investor in First Light in New Zealand. I was flattered, and I said yes, because it was the most sustainable business I had ever seen. But one thing, again, leads to another. Then one of the founders of First Light said to me, you really need to do a steak restaurant. So that's really where that started, which is I said, well, I thought about it before, but I didn't think there was enough great grass-fed meat to do a steak restaurant. So now we're going to get to Andy's part of the question.
Well, no, but this is crazy, right? The way that you said it, right? You settled on the beef that that this is the beef that you're going to use, but then you're like, let me go around the world and see what else that we can learn. Right. But we know we're not using the other beef. We've settled on that.
But we always want to learn for sure, because that's how we come at things, right? We are unbelievably inquisitive, and we can be highly analytical. We try to be disciplined, but it's a creative process. But we think we create better when we learn more. But yes, we found. So when I first wanted to do a steak restaurant, theoretically, was before I knew First Light, and I ruled it out because I did not believe that you could have the consistent marbling you need in grass-fed beef to do what I think steak restaurants ought to do. And I don't like to criticize other restaurants, but I do think as a steak restaurant, it would be important to be able to deliver a steak cooked the way you say it's going to be. But if you have wildly different marbling in meat, it becomes very difficult to do. And I do think steak restaurants or steakhouses often do miss. If you ask for a medium rare and you get medium plus, it's kind of a bummer. So I just can't do it. We can't be as precise because the meat doesn't exist. But then we found the meat. Then we're like, oh, okay, let's try this. But to Andy's point, Mike Odell, one of the founders of First Light, and I flew down to Argentina, and we went to 27 restaurants in 3.5 days.
Told you, insane.
On a mission to learn things. We did not think we were going to use Argentinian beef. That wasn't even a question. That was not our interest. But we wanted to understand some key things about how beef is cooked in Argentina and make sure that we weren't missing some things, or there was things for us to learn. Some of the cooking style itself comes from back in 2000, 2001, where I spent time in France at a restaurant there, and the chef and the daughter were nice enough to talk to me about how they were cooking. So. So long answer. I'm not sure. Maybe I didn't answer either one fully, but that's some of the things that come to mind. Dom.
Well, yeah. Give me a specific example of the things you learned, because I remember you telling me you went to Argentina and you saw how they were cooking steak, and you're like, okay, well, we don't want to do exactly this, but we want to do a version of this. But in your, again, I'm just going to use the word, in your insane mind, the answer is, let us go make something where we can do the thing that we want to do, right?
Well, there's a very specific thing, Andy. You're right, which is we cook our steaks primarily two different ways. One on fire and one on steel. When we're cooking on fire, our grill is Argentinian based, but it's not fully an Argentine or Argentinian grill.
What does that mean?
There's a V grate that a lot of times people use in the great system for an Argentine. So what makes it Argentinian, there's a surface that can be raised and lowered with a bed of coals and a brasero next to it. And that's a very typical setup. But often people cook with a V grate, a grate shaped like a V. And every time that we did that in our test kitchen, we didn't like the results. So we actually built a custom grate system that we have that we is not yet patent pending, but we ought to get around to doing that, which really for us made a huge difference. But so we did this, but we asked ourselves, maybe we just don't know how to use the V grate. So before we abandoned the V grate, we flew to Argentina to find out why are we just idiots and don't know how to use this thing. And that's a long, funny story in itself, but I'll just tell you the end of the story. So the 27th restaurant that we went to, of course it was the 27th.
This is what's pissing me off. This guy's probably $1.25, and he went to 27 restaurants in 3 days. If I go to 2 restaurants,
he's pretty tall, Dom.
He's almost my height.
But I could tell you, we only ate steak. I mean, we did not put any calories.
Right, you're
in
like
it.
no pastry.
But why did you go to Argentina? Why didn't you go to Texas? Why did you go there?
Because Argentina, the V grate system is something we really wanted to understand because we knew we were using an Argentinian styled grill, but we were going to move away from one component of it, and we wanted just to make sure that we weren't wrong. And but it's funny that it was literally the 27th place that we went to that the chef and owner kind of told us that we could have had a Zoom with him. And
Right. You told me that.
Solved.
No, he had all literally. We went there and
they've eaten 90,000 calories at this point.
And the thing is, people in Buenos Aires, and we actually were in Montevideo, which is not Argentina, and people there probably have different sensibilities about what they like and don't like in steaks, and that's fine. That's great. But what we want is a good sear on the outside and a completely rendered fat red middle that melts in your mouth. Mm-hmm. And when we went there and steak after steak after steak really didn't have much sear on the outside because the V only touches pieces of it. And we had come to the determination after 26 restaurants that it's okay. They do it that way because they like it that way, but we want something different. And that's totally cool. But then we go to this place called Corte, which is great. We love that place. Story. And it wasn't even on our list, but the fella down there that we knew said, you should try. I know the chef, you should go to this one last place. And we come in, he's like, what are you guys up to? And we told him what we're doing and where we've been. He goes, let me walk you into the kitchen. And literally in 5 minutes, he told us everything we learned. Because he didn't use V grades. And we're like, well, what? You have a different. He's like, oh, and he's like, well, here, the V grade system could be great, but I like to get more sear, so I do it differently, and basically kind of debunked the things that we were trying to figure out. But in all seriousness, if we had a Zoom with him for 30 minutes, could have saved 3.5 days.
But the process,
it's amazing. I find it
fascinating
how the level of learning, understanding, that's why you're as successful as you are, is because you go down this road. But I also I kind of wrestled a little bit with that myself. When is done better than perfect, and how do you kind of because it sounds like you've perfected everything you laid your hands on.
Yeah, we should talk about Italy for both of you because you go back all the time just to find better versions of things that you've already tried, and I love that about you, Dom, and that's why so many people buy from you because you're discovering stuff for them as well. You're the one who's making the effort. That's a big part of what the Cheese Store is. But so you said 27 meals. Tell me how much pasta, Jerry, that you and Lele ate when you were figuring out Wovo, because you told me about some trip where the number was so stupid that I've forgotten because it sounded unbelievable to me.
Yeah, the trip that we did with Carlo and Lele, who Lele started the sushi business with me, and then Carlo's brother, Lele, started the Wovo with Lele and me and some other folks as well. And Carlo was still living in Italy. He had not experienced eating with me and Lele before. And that can be an experience. Because Lele is maybe one of one people I know in this world that can eat more than I can when we do these kind of things, and he can. I mean, and you know, so I fear Lely at that moment.
Wow.
But
he's also not a huge guy.
but anybody else that I eat with, I'm like, you know, Nozawa used to be able to eat more than me, but he doesn't now. But so poor Carlo, we go on this trip, and this was 2 days, Rome, Bologna, and Lely says it was 80 pastas. And
yeah, see, of course I didn't believe you.
It might have been, and I think I thought it was 78 per my notes. We have, and by the way,
that's a massive difference.
We have notes on all this stuff.
Yeah,
I wrote a food report from the Buenos Aires.
They
trip.
have time to go to 80 restaurants, but they don't have time to go look at the notepad to actually count how many there are. But it was a lot.
But we did, and people say, "Oh, you just had one taste." It's like, no, we didn't have one taste. Now we didn't eat a full order of every pasta for every person, but I can tell you that Carlo, by the end, was like, this is insane. But what we were doing there is we wanted to understand basically one thing, which is, where is the best noodle, the best pasta noodle? And we don't mean whether tagliatelle, tagliatini, fettuccine. We mean the base of the dough. Where is the best? And Lele and Carlo are from Rome. So, of course, they came at this, which it's going to be Rome. I didn't have a dog in that fight. I had spent a lot of time in Venice, Bologna, and Rome, and said, you know, I think the best noodle is in Bologna for what we wanted. So we ate all that pasta in all of those restaurants. And we learned more than just where we thought the best dough was, but we were also looking at, you know, who has the best cacio e pepe, who has the best carbonara, who has the best matriciana, who has the best ragu up in Bologna, who has the best brodo, who has the best crema. But it was an intense trip. I think that one was probably harder than the steak, believe it or not.
Yeah. Well, the carbs will fill you up too. And to be clear, the result of this is, on one level, if you just say this, it's going to be like you're just talking shit. It's not true. But on a factual level, the thing that I should say about Wovo, it is the most Italian restaurant that is in Los Angeles and in America, because it's the only one that's flying in fresh pasta from Italy. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true. And that's where that when we went on that journey, that 2-day journey, we had not yet realized that we were going to hire a team in Bologna and make our pasta in Bologna ourselves and fly it here. In fact, if you had told us that at the time, we probably would have told you Wovo's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But
it's called Wovo because they can't get the egg to America, so they have to get the noodle to America.
But I do think the reason why Wovo has been received so well is what you just said, Andy. Well, I think it's 2 reasons. One is because it is the only place where you can eat fresh pasta made in Italy that's never been dried and eat it in the United States. But why does that matter? Because I think people actually really like truly Italian style food. And there's different styles of Italian food, which is great. I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up with red sauce Italian and a different
more
thing.
Italian than Italy.
Of course, right, exactly. But
it's a different kind.
But offering people things that are more dedicated to, because our cacio e pepe, our matriciana, we're not stepping out with some kind of innovative thing. We're trying to be as dedicated to the best version of it, that we know. And I do think that's why people are excited about Wovo, but I also know that there's a lot of people, including some chef friends of mine, who eat at Wovo all the time and still don't understand that the noodle, we actually make it in Italy. I'm like, wait, and they're like, oh, you do? I'm like, yes, that is fundamentally what Wovo is about.
Dom, what's the most pasta you've eaten in 3 days in Italy? Or I guess a better way to ask this question, do you have an equivalent story of something that somewhat makes you resembles what Jerry did, or are your trips just a lot more tame?
No, I mean, yeah. Look, you're there for R&D, right? At least for the most part. So you have an itinerary, and I'm pretty meticulous about keeping an itinerary, keeping notes. I have my journal, and it's pretty interesting because when I go to Italy, I do what I tell everybody not to, which is bounce from city to city to city to city. You spend 7 hours in a car, you're up north, you're coming around. Like the last trip I did in February, we actually started in Puglia, went all the way up to Verona, and then came back down on the other side. So you don't do that. And by the way, that was like a 9-day trip. So it was like, there was a lot of driving, was a lot of stuff. But I couldn't. I mean, without looking at my notes, I would have to refer back. But like I mean, kind of like the same thing. You're not like sitting down to like a full meal, but you're rather tasting and trying and trying. So like, I definitely, I can definitely see how, you know, doing that, going through like there's so much. It's really interesting too, especially when you go to Italy. Like, I feel like there's so much innovation, but yet there's so much old school happening. But like, and it's almost counterintuitive because they stick to a lot of traditional methods. But I don't know, for me, every time I go back, I just see new things that I've never seen before. But those actually turn out to be like really old dishes that have been going on.
Yeah, I mean,
forever.
that's what's cool, right? Because a lot of times the innovation, the thing that you think is innovation is just somebody improving something that has long existed, but they're still being very respectful of it. So, I mean, that sort of ties back to what we're talking about with Wovo, right? Essentially, the pasta is made exactly the way it would be made in Italy because it is the pasta that's being made in Italy.
Exactly.
And the recipe is exactly the same.
Exactly.
But when you do your bolognese or whatever, you're using first light beef. So tell me about, you know, some of the liberties or improvements or whatever you want to call it that you're willing to do and why you think that doesn't compromise what the dish is and how it might even make it better.
Well, you know, and if you focus on the ragu, which is the best-selling dish at Wovo, and our recipe is the original recipe from Gigina in Bologna,
which is locked up in the library, right?
And how do we have that and all that? Is because they were generous people. We went, and actually Carlo and Lowell went to a follow-up trip and ate because we just loved their ragu, and it's famous. People know their ragu. And you know, as often is the case in the restaurant business, people are very generous of spirit and heart. And Lowell and Carlo just said to them, "Hey, we're opening a restaurant in Los Angeles." So they knew exactly what we were doing. He said, "And we think your stuff is so great." And it's like, "Oh, come on in the kitchen." And the owner of the restaurant invited us in and taught them a bunch of stuff. But long story short, the chef at the time of the restaurant later left, and he runs our operation in Bologna.
Wow.
Yeah.
Blessed by the owners.
Sure.
Right?
That's so cool.
And their head pasta maker, pastificio, Stefania, was actually the first person that joined us. Again, blessed by them. So the warmth that they showed us, but they shared a lot with us. But we'd love to give them the credit for doing what they did for us to get the thing started. But I think I got off track, and I'm not sure I'm addressing your question.
Oh no, that just like what made you realize?
Oh,
Okay,
and then
it's okay to use the recipe pretty much step by step, but swap this in because this is the beef that we like.
So when we started on the noodle side, the recipe, there were some questions of, and I got to say this the right way, but there were an opportunity to get some even better eggs that were more expensive than maybe a normal restaurant might want to do. But we felt free to do that. But like that was, you know, we did testing. We're like, these eggs just perform better. But then when it came to using first light beef, Pino, who's the chef of the old place, has now been running our pasta making operation since 2016. Pino, when he tried the first light beef, he's like, no, this is how the beef used to be. He's like, this is exactly what you want. He goes, we're not changing anything. This is better beef for this. So he got very excited about that. But like also, you know, so our ragu, of course, has beef, but it also has pork. We needed the sausage for the recipe, and the sausage maker shared us his recipe so that we could make the sausage for our ragu. Pino knows the recipe. Germano knows the recipe. I don't, and I don't want to know because we're being respected. They said you can use it,
so cool.
but don't share it. So, you know, we haven't really strayed away from in this case on the ragu. But with with Germano and Carlo and Lele and me and Pino, with kind of all of our mutual blessing, we've made some things that we do think give it the chance to be better, which is what we're always trying to do. You know, how can we make things better? But back down to something you said before, I love when I go to Italy and I have something traditional that I haven't had before, because that is. So I was in Puglia for the first time a couple months ago, and just had some things I hadn't had before. Because whenever I go anywhere, and Andy knows this, I want what's traditional. I want to know when I go to a city, how do people eat here? What do they like? Don't tell me what the tourists want. Don't tell me what you think I want. How do people eat here? I don't want all the innovative, crazy stuff.
Right. If somebody tells Jerry this is a new avant-garde restaurant and it's got 3 Michelin stars, I mean, he immediately is going to be like, okay, where do you actually want to go eat?
Right. And Italians can't do anything. Well, I mean, I should watch what I say, but man,
finish your thought, Dom.
You gotta keep it simple. As soon as Italians start to go this elevated, I first of all, I don't want it. That's not why I'm there. And I really do. I respect that tradition. In a lot of ways, we're very similar because, don't give me a menu that has the English on the back. If that's the case, I'm in the wrong spot already, right? And I love that. And that's why, when we go with one of my best friends lives in Puglia. So that was really the first place that I started going to Italy and learning. And I was like, yeah, show me where you go. Show me, I want to be with the people who are hanging out on the Tuesday night with the family eating the dinner that nobody speaks. And that's what's super special. But I love that tradition. I really, really do.
And that's what I love about Italy. Because if you ask people where's the best pasta, they say my grandma, my nonna.
Yeah.
But okay, great. We're not going to your grandma's tonight. So where can we eat? And really trying to be clear with people. Show me the places that represent the culinary traditions of this place. And my wife and I have vacationed more in Italy than anywhere else combined because we always talk about going here, and we've been to a number of places.
Sure.
But can we go here? Can we go there? I'm like, yeah, but the food's better in Italy. And and why? Because it's simple, it's honest, it's authentic, it expresses the ingredients. And I understand that people may say that French food is better than Indian food. And Italian food, not Indian. And that's fine, but I do like more simple expressions of ingredients just for me. And then, yes, Dom, I will have to agree with you that if somebody is going to take Italian food and turn it into some, molecular gastronomy tour de force of this food used to be one thing, but now it's another thing, and isn't that cool? Not for me.
Well, that's why we also all like Italian-American food, because in a way it comes from the same place, right?
Right.
It's simplicity, it's poverty, it's figuring out how time can make things better if you don't have the resources to get the thing that is supposedly better, and then realizing that with time, this other thing is better than the expensive thing, right? That's sort of where it all comes from, Sunday sauce, etc. So even though we're all in this room, we'll make the correct argument that those are totally, in many ways, distinct types of food. It comes from the same place, and it is Italian and it is American at the same time, and that's why it makes sense for us.
But growing up in New Jersey, it's a funny thing is when you're from a place like that, you don't realize that it's a different thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's, at least being in the food world, it's important to know they are different things. And you can love or hate anything you want to love or hate, but just know they're different. Some people, New York pizza has been around for almost as long as Italian pizza.
Yeah.
But Naples pizza is different than New York pizza, and it clearly is. I happen to love both. And if you had to make me choose between the two, I don't know that I could.
Yeah.
But sometimes people think that one is trying to be the other. No, they've been different for a long time.
It's so funny you say that. I remember the first time I went to Naples, and also too, let's be clear, you love what you grew up with. I don't care what it is. It's just a memory. That's what you love, because that's what you're used to. When I first went to Naples, and my parents haven't been back to Italy since they came to America, right? So and they came as young kids. And I'll never forget, my dad was like, hey, how was the pizza? And I was like, we went to Naples, and Dad, I kind of didn't really like it that much until I started to learn, until I started to understand. And then a little bit, obviously now, like you just said, they're both very, very different styles, and I can appreciate both styles, but it is very different. Same thing, I don't know, baked clams. I've been to Italy a million times. I really haven't seen baked clams. Chicken franchise or chicken. There's so many New York Italian dishes.
Right, baked clams is one of the best things that you'll eat ever. But again, you just acknowledge that that's a different thing. Yeah, you do eat that, right? You literally go eat a whole meal with me, and then you're
Sometimes.
I'm going to go to La Dolce Vita and eat baked clams now?
Why not?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very Jerry-like move.
But I also agree with you, Dom, that, if you're talking about truly traditional Naples pizza, I'll take the New York pizza. But people who have, oh my God, for me to say this, innovated slightly. But the last time I was in Naples and I went to Enzo Cocha's place, and he innovated slightly. so that his center still had a little crisp underneath it, and it's not the Naples wallet that right. Then I was like, oh, wait a second, this is next level now. But I get that people in Naples who grew up with the very, very soggy, wet center, that's what they love.
Yeah.
Okay, but if I have to have that, but every American place that I know of that has tried to do a true Naples pizza starts out with a wet center and then starts to ferment, because Americans don't like that.
Yeah.
I mean, they just don't. And apparently people in Naples do. Me, I liked it when it's a little, it does get firmed up a little bit.
So you go out if you go have pizza with my parents in Staten Island, we ask for the pizza well done.
Crispy.
Yeah, crispy, right? Like,
Right.
But the best pizzas for the American style is always when you order by the slice, because they throw it back in the oven and they re-crisp
Yeah.
it. I mean,
Man, yeah.
Well, no,
Sign me up.
and the words that people use to describe things too, it's just really based on what the other reference points are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's somebody who's like told me before, like, you go to Rome, like you eat all the pizza and all the pizza's like a cracker. I'm like, all the pizza's not really like a cracker. You're just comparing it to something where it's super, super soft. So
Right.
this seems... So you should start at the baseline where you acknowledge this is the type of pizza I like, and this is the type of pizza I don't like, right? And then sort of describe it in the most accurate way. But I just love that food is that personal, right? Where people are that strongly feel like that one's correct, that one's incorrect. And we're sort of now, I think as you get older, you realize that most of these things have been optimized. Every style is pretty much as good as the way that the people who make it want it to be. There's not that many things that you can do to improve. And the way that you improve it is you sort of create something that is innovative. That's like more like a hybrid, right? It's why, everybody thinks there's such an interesting pizza scene in Tokyo, because they revise something that's deeply Italian. And it doesn't taste like pizza that you get in America that's influenced by the same places in Italy, obviously.
Yep. And what I've had in Tokyo appears to me to be more repeating a Naples style, which is nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. But if you really, really, really want a Naples style, you should probably go to Naples.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a long way from Tokyo. But.
So let's talk a little bit about First Light, because one thing that's sort of important, obviously you do have a Michelin-starred sushi restaurant in terms of Nozawa Bar, mm-hmm. but for lack of a better word, you want your restaurants to be accessible. We've always talked about how you want to give people more, right? Like you want to make them feel like, wow, that was a great value. I want to come back here all the time. First Light is now at all your restaurants, but you can also buy First Light, the steaks, the bolognese now, I think, the hot dogs at Bristol Farms. There are cuts that you can get it at Ralph's. You've talked to me about issues with capacity for First Light. So tell me about how that's growing and what your involvement is.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I became the first outside investor or owner in First Light, which I was honored to be, because I said it was this most sustainable thing. So to be sustainable, regenerative, respect the environment, you need to use the whole carcass. The animals aren't grown only with ribeyes. Okay, and so you need to have hot dogs, and you need to have many different things sold many different places. At Matū, we get only we have very specific marble score requirements for what we serve at Matū, and that's one thing. And then there's a steak club that has a different set of marble score requirements, and then you can get something at Bristol Farms or what have you. But to your question, Andy, a couple of years ago, Jason Ross, who's the CEO and founder, asked me about growth as an outside owner, and I said, I don't think, the herd is, in the scheme of beef production, it's tiny, but still, to them, it's a large operation. It's a collective of farmers, and I advise that we don't grow the herd over time, and we focus on optimizing the carcass, because that, and I wasn't telling Jason anything he hadn't thought of before, but he was like, I'm glad you say that, because I agree. Because as we optimize the carcass, it has we don't have any more environmental impact, but more people get to experience more things from the existing size of the herd. So so jumping forward, a couple weeks ago, we did something that I'm really excited about, which is I became a larger owner and more involved in First Light, partly because one of the other founders, Jed, bought a farm, a very large farm that I'm part of, because the one thing that First Light doesn't own is the dirt. First Light owns often the animals, the genetics, the process, the plan, but the farmers, it's a collective or cooperative of farmers, they own the dirt, and sometimes they own the animals. It depends on how it works. But this gives us an opportunity to actually, where 20% of the herd roughly will be on our own farm, so that whoever this we is, but I guess I could say me. I don't want to say it that way.
It's just Jerry. He's going to be farming
from the dirt to the animal, all the way to Matu to the guest eating it. It's completely integrated from end to end. And we look at this as an opportunity by owning this farm to improve the genetics, improve the environmental impact, improve the taste, improve the marbling score. It's something that literally just got done a couple of weeks ago and was a big lift to do. But again, getting back to what Andy was saying, it's not about growth. And a lot of our things are not about growth. It's about quality. And if growth happens because of high quality, that's the win.
Right, but in terms of the growth, I imagine that these conversations are funnier with your investors and your partners than they are even with me. But I remember one of the first things you told me about hi-ho. It's like we're capped at the number of hi-hos we can open. So if people think they're getting into this and this is going to be like Shake Shack or In-N-Out, there's zero chance of it coming close, right?
Exactly, zero chance. Yeah, people are like, how many hi-hos are there going to be? I'm like, well, tell me how big the herd's going to be. Well, I know the answer to that question. So there can be more hi-hos than there are. But there can't be 100 hi-hos. It's not even possible. It's not even a number.
Right, but
it's not a number anywhere close to that.
But he starts a quick service burger restaurant knowing that there's a cap, right?
Mm-hmm. This is what's me. So like normally I talk more than I probably should on these things, but like
are you saying I'm doing that now?
No, because like I don't want to talk. I just want to listen, because I don't think people there's no one in our industry that I can think of that comes to mind that's doing the full circle the way you are. And to be honest, I didn't know that you had your hand in the cap. Like I didn't know any of this. And to hear you talk about it, to hear your philosophy about business, the environment, like, I mean, I'm blown away, like honestly. And I don't like to give compliments.
You're a very nice guy, Don.
But all kidding aside, like, it's pretty amazing to hear what you're doing. And also, too, the one thing that we didn't really catch up on or touch on yet, but like, I'm sure we'll definitely have to have you on again. But like, it's not only your impeccable sourcing and curation of ingredients and learning and understanding, but like your execution is another level above anything else that I'll just speak for myself that I've ever seen
the
in any restaurant, in any, like, it's just unbelievable. Like talk about like, I mean, if we can be half that good, I'd be pretty fucking happy.
Well, thank you. And it makes me think a couple things. And, because people often ask me for advice. I mean, fortunately, what we've done together in our businesses has been such that sometimes people ask for advice. And I tell people that if you make quality and consistency your number one objective, you may or may not succeed. But if it's not your number one objective, you will not succeed at making that. You may succeed as a business. There's plenty of restaurants that's not their thing, and it's fine. But if you don't commit to quality 100% all the time, you have no chance. And even if you do, you still might have a chance, because it's hard. The ingredients change, the inputs change. There's so many things that can happen. But the second thing that that made me think of, Dom, so thanks for asking the question, is that we don't spend a lot of time getting into this, but Hi-Ho is its own company. Matu is its own company. The sushi business, Nozawa Bar, SUGARFISH, KazuNori is its own company. And Wovo is its own company. Why do I say that? There is no way I can imagine if we were trying to execute across all of these things with one team, forget about it. So we don't talk about it a lot, but just making it clear that each business is a separate business with its own set of founders and operating team that are focused. So the pasta business is not worried about what's going. Well, it might, Lely and I worry about what goes on in the sushi business, but the pasta team is not worried about what's happening in the sushi business. And I've seen other groups actually do some pretty good stuff when they work across cuisines like that. There are other examples, but to us, that's just a bridge too far. So when people
there's a lot of other restaurant groups where they have one culinary team and they work on 6 different types of food. You're right. I never thought about it like that.
And we do not. I mean, just to understand, we explicitly, specifically do not. We have fully independent teams that their job is to execute. And thank you again, Dom, for saying that we can execute at a high level because we hold ourselves to an insanely high standard. If you go, Andy's eating with me in my restaurants. Dom, I don't think you.
I was never invited.
Oh, you've been invited. You haven't shown up. But
let Dom continue the stick of never being invited
but
anymore.
when we eat in our own restaurants, we're tough. And it's not we don't beat people up. But when I sit and eat in one of our restaurants, when Lely does, when Tom does, when Carlo does, when Scott, Mike, Sharoy, Matt.
Yeah.
Ryan, I think I hit everybody across the 4 different businesses. Hope I didn't leave anybody out. But there'll be a series of notes if there's things that were off point. And it's not to beat people up, but how do we get better if we don't know where we're short? And there are notes that I will give that say, okay, the salmon today, it's in spec, it's a little low. Nobody will notice, but I did, right? And just flag that so that we can get better. And the other thing is, we actually want people to tell us when we're screwing up.
Right. Well, you appreciate the feedback. It's very interesting because, as you can imagine, I go to a lot of previews. I go to friends and family. With certain chefs, you realize, especially if you go out of your way to send them something, they actually don't even really want to hear it.
No, they don't.
They ask you for it, and then you tell them these things, and one of them is like a very, very easy thing, and then it's just like they think about it for a second, probably get a little pissed off, and it's over. The thing that I've noticed with you, and we don't have to speak about specific things, is that there will be people telling you things at different tastings, maybe even people that you don't know very well, but you take that seriously, and then I'll notice, oh, you changed that.
Yeah, and you are right. There are many chefs that really don't want to know because I know many of them that don't want to know.
We know the same ones.
And it's one of the things that you want to determine quickly, right? It's who wants to know and who doesn't want to know because I don't want to offend people. Sure. But we want to know. And literally, like Dom, if you were at Hi-Ho and you thought something was off, I'd appreciate a text in the moment. Because we can do more things about it in the moment. We can, because otherwise we have to go back and look at
who was there, what they did,
what's happening, look at cameras and try to recreate the past. We could actually, in the moment, try to understand what's going on. But for us, again, it's kind of simple. How do you get better if you're not critical and you're not open to criticism? Mm-hmm. But again, there's a lot of people in the restaurant industry that don't want that, and that's fine too. And they can be successful doing things the way that they're doing. But to us, we think dedicated teams that are, focused on each individual cuisine type as separate businesses is the model that, that has worked for us.
I'm going to selfishly ask you a question.
Uh-oh.
So, no. So I understand the businesses operate independently. Mm-hmm. Okay. When this is very interesting because I actually had the pleasure of coming into Matū, sitting at the bar and having a cheesesteak. And I've never done that before. The first time I ever had the cheesesteaks, full transparency, LACC, when you guys were bringing them in, of course, ordered them for Super Bowl, stuff like that. Incredible, excellent, amazing, top to bottom. Sat at the bar, and it was just an incredible experience because not only was it incredible because I got to sit there and actually, I was number one in line. I got there an hour early. I sat down. I went with I think a mutual friend, Mario Del Perro from Mendocino Farms.
Okay, Mark, awesome.
So he was like, hey, let's go because we were meeting and he's like, yeah, we'll sit at the bar. We had 2 Peronis. And what was interesting to me was, yes, incredible meal, as we already know. But the service. Everybody was in tune from the guy knew. I mean, I think it hit whatever time you guys opened, like the music went on. Like there was just everybody knew what they were supposed to be doing. And you go into your other restaurant, it's like everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. I, as a business owner right now, like you wrestle with like hiring talent, attracting talent. I think we're getting really good at, but like training our teams, I find that to be so difficult because then I just had this conversation yesterday. I just did this leadership meeting with Mario that he taught me. And it was interesting because when I sat down, I said, yeah, like I can show you what I want to get done, but I have a hard time articulating it. But I notice in every one of your, I'm going to call them institutions because that's what they are, but like every place that I go to of yours, there is a very, very consistent level of service also. Do you do any type of cross training when it comes to the service aspect of the business? Because it seems to be very consistent everywhere.
Funny enough, no.
Wow.
So nobody has ever worked in one of our businesses and gone into another. And we don't do any cross training at all. But it's and it's not that we haven't considered that before. But again, it would be given how we're wired, it would be hard to do. But that being said, we share processes and practices across our businesses. So the sushi business started first, right? And when it was created. and then the other business have come along, but we have an intellectual property sharing agreement amongst all of them. So processes, approaches, practices, all those things are shared amongst the businesses, and they can use them as they want. So there's a common mindset, but what you're talking about is one of the hardest things, and probably in any industry, but in this industry,
right?
Which
guest
is,
experience. It's all about guest
building
experience.
That culture and
we really got our eyes opened, when we launched the patio outside a few weeks ago. And, I've full transparency. I've never worked in a restaurant. Yeah, I've washed dishes. I've never been on the other side of that
When I was
restaurant.
here on Saturday, I was watching Tom. He was like bussing tables. I mean, I get this is what you do when you're the owner, but they were packed and it was really great. But I don't think he realized sort of the level of what was about to happen.
And we did our research. I mean, look, we have 2 Michelin star chefs that work with us on site. And they're
Jerry cares a lot about Michelin stars.
No.
It's good that you told him that.
but look, I mean, at the end of the day,
he has one. Let's be fair.
It was a very it literally was very eye opening, because there's another level of service and hospitality, and I felt like I kind of built my brand doing that back in the day at the cheese store, but to be able to now see there's a little bit of a table service element, and I started learning new ways in how to approach guests and stuff, and I've been doing this for 25 years in customer service. And I mean, hey, we're always learning, like you, right? We're always learning.
And Andy said the right word, which is we call it about setting the culture. And I'm telling you, it's so unbelievably difficult.
Yeah.
And we've been fortunate that some of the things that we've done have worked. We are critical of ourselves. We look at things, if you had lunch with Mario, he didn't send me a text that day, neither did you. So I guess nothing was terrible. That's good, because I think you guys both would. But establishing, I hate the word protocols, but what do you expect? Because you, Dom, would be unbelievable from a guest service standpoint, because I know you, and you're great at that. But how do you train other people? And then how do you train other people to train other people? And how do you set a standard that you hold people accountable, not from a punitive basis, but that we build a team environment where everybody is psyched that we are living up to what we set out to do? It's always been hard. I'll be honest with you. It's been harder and harder. COVID didn't help. Coming out of COVID didn't help. It feels like it gets harder with every passing day. But fortunately, there are people out there that you can find that want to come into a culture of working hard, making guests happy, and having our people work hard. To say having a good time doing it, you have to enjoy the grind.
Absolutely.
You shouldn't get in the restaurant industry if you don't. If you're the kind of person that doesn't like the grind, then you shouldn't do
and
this.
Even the nicest restaurants, it's the glamour and it's also the grind. All right, so I want to tell one story that you know about, and then one story that you don't, because to me it sort of sums up what this culture is, and I think it's going to lead you to talk about some things that I'd really love for you to talk about. So you like to open your restaurants, obviously, in clusters, because even though they're different companies, there are efficiencies, right? Just your time, everything else. And you recently opened multiple restaurants at Sportsman's Lodge in Studio City near where I live. So I sometimes will do a thing where I go to one of the restaurants because there's outdoor seating, and I order something for my family and they eat that, and then I wait for food at the other restaurant, and then I take that food home. It's just become a whole thing. I think lots of people do that. I'm at Hi-Ho. Somebody who works at SUGARFISH is on their break, comes in and orders. And then the person who took the order 3 minutes later has a moment. It's walking around the dining room, bussing things, grabbing things that people just left on the tables because they're animals and they didn't bust shit themselves. Sees the person and says, "Wait, you work at SUGARFISH, right? Or you work at one of the restaurants?" And the answer is yes. He goes, "Oh, cool. I'm sorry. The next time that you're here, I'm going to remember you. I'm going to give you the employee discount." And they have a nice conversation about this. And then the person at Hi-Ho mentions that they've never been to SUGARFISH. Is it a good place to take a date? And the employee of SUGARFISH is very enthusiastic, explaining to them, it's this type of restaurant, this is what you do. You're not going to be there forever, but if it's a first date, this could be really fun. And it is a nicer type of place that, you might want to take your girl if you want to impress her. And that to me is a very sweet moment. And it happened in 30 seconds because these people were working, but they all understood that they didn't quite understand what the relationship was, but they were part of the same thing. And that felt cool. It's not just I'm working at one restaurant. I sort of have advantages and friends at these other restaurants. So I found that to be cool because I know they're different companies. And the other thing, Dom, and I don't know if you know this, but Jerry waits in line at SUGARFISH. He waits in line at all his restaurants. There's no cutting the line. There's no like special number. You can only imagine,
The notes he's taking while he's waiting in line.
Yeah, or no, all of his wealthy West Side friends, right, or successful West Side friends are used to cutting every line, right, getting into Oscar parties and shit like that. I can't imagine Jerry's phone where they ask him for shit and he just has to ignore them. Because the other story I want to tell is, I think this is during the pandemic, and this is on one of those nights where it's the fifth dinner. I'm not exaggerating. I mean, you remember the night. There's a bet involved that somebody else won, lost, whatever. And go to Santa Monica, and we're at one of your restaurants, and I take the food from that restaurant and go stand at the patio at the other restaurant, and you don't yell at me, but you look at me very sternly like, you can't do that, Andy. So Jerry follows the rules more than anybody else's, and I think that's part of where the culture comes from, similar to how, your thing opens. Of course, you're the one busting the tables, but you sort of set that example. So I guess the question I'm asking, why do you follow the rules so closely, Jerry? And do you really believe it's setting an example, or is it about something else, about a different form of craziness that I don't know about?
Well, that could be something I don't know about. But look, I do, as you know, and I do wait in line when I go to our restaurants. I went to Matu to get a cheesesteak right after I hurt my Achilles earlier in the year. So it wasn't great to be standing up, and I guess I wasn't thinking about it, and ended up standing outside for 45 minutes. And people
I know the feeling.
People bumped into me and said, "You're waiting." I'm like, well, that's the option that I have available to me, so that's what I'm going to do. But standing wasn't so great. But yeah, Andy, I think that how can I expect other people to do what I won't do, and how can I expect our staff to respect our rules if I break them? Because things break down in multiple ways, right? If I start saying, hey, just slide me in, then people start to say that's okay. And then what rules are we serious about and what ones are we not? And that's where culture, I think, really devolves. Because, and I try to do this, and we all try to in our businesses, which is we try not to say things that we're not going to live up to. Because then, because let's say you say 10 things, but 2 things you ignore. Well, then people don't know whether the other 8 are serious either. So I really do think culturally it's important. And do I really find it inconvenient? Yes, I do. Do some of my friends, they won't go to SUGARFISH with me because they're not willing to wait because they're like, I don't wait in lines. I'm like, okay, then.
Right. I think
I guess you're not going to SUGARFISH.
I think there are people I know that.
Yes.
Who have a small interest in SUGARFISH and like, well, I'm only ever ordering that shit because it's too annoying otherwise.
Yeah, and but again, I do think to both of to what Dom talked about before, to set the culture is to set expectations that we have of ourselves, and then to live up to them. And if the first thing that I do is say, yeah, that's for everybody else, those rules aren't for me, and I also I pay whenever I go to my restaurants. And no, I don't get the employee discount purposely. I don't. And people will say, I've had dinner with people where I pick up the check and they're like, I thought you are part of this place. I'm like, well, I am.
But
they're like,
there needs to be a transaction.
It's like, I'm, and that's also part of something else, Andy, which is you have a different relationship to when you eat food, whether you're paying or not, and it's fundamentally different. Friends and family. Those are great. What are friends and family for? They're good for debugging your kitchen, debugging your service staff. If you think it's great to really get feedback from people, people have a very, very different relationship when they pay for something. So I want to make sure I'm paying for everything in our restaurant so that when I give the feedback to the team, they understand it's coming from, as a guest would experience this. But that's something that I believe firmly in.
Yeah, well, it ties back to the very beginning, right? Because I'm joking about the fact that obviously I think you're insane. Because if you're insane, in some ways I'm similarly insane. I get it. What we're talking about is sort of putting in the work, putting in the time, sort of chasing something, right? And doing the things a certain way because you want to be the best version of it. You want to be better. Because another funny story that I don't think I've told you is that we have a mutual friend, and I think like Lele, who's a founder of SUGARFISH, a partner in SUGARFISH and in Wovo. That's correct, right?
Yep, absolutely.
meets a mutual friend of ours for the first time, is excited to meet him and says, oh, well, anytime you want to go eat at Sugarfish, let me know. So this friend now thinks that there's a way for him to cut the line at Sugarfish. But Layla really meant is that, no, I'll meet you here and maybe I'll get there a little early and I'll stand in line and then we can eat at Sugarfish at this designated time. And when he realized that's what Layla was saying, the response was like, well, all these guys are completely nuts, right? But that just made me sort of just like, appreciate just how different you are. And tying it back to the first thing we're talking about, there's probably people who are like, okay, well, now I can get a cheesesteak in the dining room. There's some way that I can hack this with offering to pay a certain amount of money or just ordering this and only getting the cheesesteak or getting an extra cheesesteak. Have you been getting any of that? Or at this point, do people just respect that you have rules and they won't try it with you?
Well, people respect what we're doing, which we appreciate. We have had some funny stories, though, of people... maybe somebody sometime had their security guard go to the bar and order the cheesesteak and then swap during the meal. But I'm not going to say who did it, and I'm not going to say who did it. Maybe that happened once, but there's but about the lock, stock, and barrel the other night, though, we did have a situation come up where, as I said, it's a bunch of food. The party of four couldn't finish one of their cheesesteaks and gave it to guests at another table, which caused a problem for us. We weren't really ready to handle that because,
Wow.
so we maybe we didn't handle that the best way that we should have. But because we're trying to establish there's certain things, and look, we don't have rules for rules' sake. There's reasons why. We don't tend to tell people all the reasons because they don't really care.
Right.
But if anyone wants to know, there's a rule. We try to say yes as often as we can. And now I'm on a tangent. But I love when people tell me about Sugarfish and there's never any substitutions. Like, are you kidding me? Never any substitutions? People substitute stuff all the time, all day at every Sugarfish.
Yeah.
So, we don't have the rules just for rules' sake. But back on the cheesesteak thing, people do respect what's going on. And again, why do we not serve the cheesesteak in the dining room? Because we don't have the capacity on our plancha to make the cheesesteaks work in the dining room as a general thing. And then somebody said, what if everybody orders the lock, stock, and barrel? Well, if so, we're screwed because we won't get through the night.
You'll open another restaurant just to do that.
We won't get through the night. But there's always a reason why. Again, whether people care about our reasons or not, it's a different
funny
story.
how people get fixated on rules because they're just it's the whole customer thing, right? They're just used to having it their way they want it their. I remember talking to Sang-Yoon, Hat's father's office, which has rules. That was the place where there's no ketchup. And then one day he talked to me about it. It's like, I was actually just trying to open a place where I serve the food the way that I want to serve it. And think about how few rules there actually are at this restaurant. Meaning that, like, you can just stand in line and come to this restaurant anytime, right? You can go there and it's a bar, so you don't even have to order food, right? It's a bar, you don't have to order alcohol. So sometimes these comes from a place where they're trying to create something where what's the more inclusive, accessible way to do? But then people just get annoyed that, like, you can't have a burger a certain way, but you go there not to eat the burger your way. You go there because apparently this is a chef who knows what he's doing. It's just interesting to me how the narratives have come through and how, yeah, a lot of people make fun of you because of the fact that you, quote, have rules. But I've also heard great stories about, like, how the guy who owns Twitter and has X now, like, has stood in your restaurant, like, waiting to be recognized or something. And the fact that you don't do that for anybody, but then the people see you standing in line, it's like, yeah, that can be idiosyncrasy, but it's your business, right?
Yeah, look, and again, we're trying to do what allows us to be consistent and give people quality over and over and over. And when it comes to rules around substitutions and these things, most of that is one thing: trying to reduce errors in the kitchen.
Yeah.
If you go to Hi-Ho, you can do pretty much anything you want. I mean, you can actually. We have a Hi-Ho, we have a classic. The only thing you can't do is take the mustard grilling off the Hi-Ho, only because it becomes a classic at that point. So we can just give you a classic if you want. But you can add, and do I want to do all those things? Absolutely not. Why? Because I know it leads to mistakes, and I know how upset people are when they come home and their daughter's burger has cheese on it and it wasn't supposed to. And it sucks. It's awful, right? And every time we make a mistake, and we make mistakes, it gets compounded because of all of the modifications. But we still do them because we have to do them for people. But I get that if you didn't make any modifications, believe me, you would make far fewer mistakes. Your training would be much easier. It'd be so much easier. So we try to limit those things to places where it matters. But the other thing that rules around food come from, and this is maybe a little bit more to the father's office thing, is there are certain things that we don't want to serve and then have people judge us on it because we don't think it tastes good. So that, like if we think something that we've eaten just doesn't work, then we will choose not to serve it that way. And then some people can say, wait, but I'm the paying guest. I get to do whatever I want. Okay, that's one theory of the world. We'd rather not be judged on putting out something that we don't think is worth eating. And maybe ketchup on a father's office burger really is not something that tastes good. I'm a ketchup on a burger guy.
Yeah.
But I get it, which is, as a person in the food business, you'd rather people, because, newsflash, sometimes people are critical of people's food, right? You'd rather at least be criticized for what you intended to put on the plate rather than what somebody else did to it on the plate. But that all being said, we make as many modifications as we can.
Yeah, but you don't have certain things. Like, what's the extent of condiments that you have available to customers at all of your restaurants combined? Is it essentially just ketchup, and then obviously they can have salt and pepper?
There's mayo at Hi-Ho. But there's things that some people think of as condiments, like ponzu sauce, which we think is not a condiment,
right.
So we don't offer that.
Right, but
on the side.
but yeah, there's no steak sauce, there's no hot sauce. That's sort of what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
true.
Do people ask for that, or do they at this point, or do they just know that that's not that type of restaurant?
Not frequently anyway that comes up. And
all right, that's good.
But the picanha skewers has zug and tahini, so there's some
right,
sauce
those are
on
composed
it.
dishes. I mean, obviously the Thai beef salad has fish sauce on it or whatever, but
I gotta say, like, after hearing you speak for the past hour or so, once again, hate to give the compliment, but like after
what
hearing
compliment
you,
are you trying to give?
no, I'm
right
getting
now?
to it, because as I hear all of your research, all of the things that you've done, like, I want to be in your hands. Like, I don't want to stray from anything I want to be in your hands. So it's
Trust me.
Well, yeah,
Trust
it's
me.
like,
There you go.
yeah. And honestly, like I'm not one of those substitution guys anyway. There's just certain things that I don't like, but like, it's not going to kill me if I wipe it off if I had to, right? Like, but to hear everything that you've done and gone through and the experience and the testing, like why would I ever want to have something that is not the way you intended it to be? Period. I mean, it just makes sense. Now, I understand allergies and things like that aside, but I mean, God, please give it to me the way you intended. That's the best way.
And that when I eat in a restaurant, and there are a few things that I don't eat, and people who know me know exactly what those things are, and I don't eat them. But I'll say if I go to a restaurant and say, "Hey, can you do that without the olives?" If they say no, I'm like, "Cool."
I noticed I took the olives off that.
But I'm like, it's totally fine. I get it. And if they say yes, okay. And then when I eat it, I'm not going to criticize it because I'm not eating what they intended me to
Could
eat.
use an olive.
But I get it. So oftentimes, when you're sitting in a restaurant as a guest or a customer, that's not how you feel. You feel like I should be able to get anything that I want when I want it. And that's a different, kind of theory. But our theory is we should give people the things that we can give them up and until it really messes our kitchen up, which is going to cause everybody to be upset.
Sure.
And that's just not a winning strategy.
Sure.
But again, people don't want to hear that because in the moment that they want what they want, they don't want to hear about the other problems that you're going to cause. So we tend not to bore people with those details. We just try to politely decline, but say yes as often as we can.
Well, listen, this has been amazing. I feel like, bro, we gotta have you back if you're willing to come on. Like
it's been great to be here.
And like this was. I mean, I learned so much. Like I said, this is one of the few times I don't really speak, and I love to hear myself talk.
We're gonna go through this podcast. Everybody's gonna listen. We're like, well, Dom talked a lot still.
Well, I'd say this is amazing. Thank you for not only making the time to come here, but for what you're doing for our industry. And seriously, man, like we I'll speak for myself. I can only hope to execute at half the level you do, and I think we'll be pretty good in what we're doing. So thank you very much.
That's
for that.
That's kind of you to say on behalf of all 4 teams. Thank you for that comment. It's been great to be here, and I'd love to come back.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, no, thanks for being here, Jerry. I'm going to tell you something really, really nice I've never said before. I've come around to the sesame seeds on the cheesesteak. It's
That's
all right.
big. Just for you, that's a big, big thing. I
What a way to end.
never thought I'd hear those
What a way
words.
to end.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thanks so much.
Always good
Thanks,
to see
Andy.
you.
Thanks, Dom.